The Maltese Falcon, by Dashiell Hammett. Chapter 5. The Levantine. Spade did not look at the pistol. He raised his arms and, leaning back in his chair, intertwined the fingers of his two hands behind his head. His eyes, holding no particular expression, remained focused on Cairo's dark face. Cairo coughed a little apologetic cough and smiled nervously with lips that had lost some of their redness. His dark eyes were humid and bashful and very earnest. "I intend to search your offices, Mr. Spade. I warn you that if you attempt to prevent me, I shall certainly shoot you." "Go ahead." Spade's voice was as empty of expression as his face. "You will please stand." The man with the pistol instructed him at whose thick chest the pistol was aimed. "I shall have to make sure that you are not armed." Spade stood up, pushing his chair back with his calves as he straightened his legs. Cairo went around behind him. He transferred the pistol from his right hand to his left. He lifted Spade's coat tail and looked under it. Holding the pistol close to Spade's back, he put his right hand around Spade's side and patted his chest. The Levantine face was then no more than 6 inches below and behind Spade's right elbow. Spade's elbow dropped as Spade spun to the right. Cairo's face jerked back not far enough. Spade's right heel on the patent-leathered toes anchored the smaller man in the elbow's path. The elbow struck him beneath the cheekbone, staggering him so that he must have fallen had he not been held by Spade's foot on his foot. Spade's elbow went on past the astonished dark face and straightened when Spade's hand struck down at the pistol. Cairo let the pistol go the instant that Spade's fingers touched it. The pistol was small in Spade's hand. Spade took his foot off Cairo's to complete his about face. With his left hand, Spade gathered together the smaller man's coat lapels, the ruby-set green tie bunching out over his knuckles, while his right hand stowed the captured weapon away in a coat pocket. Spade's yellow-grey eyes were somber. His face was wooden, with a trace of sullenness around the mouth. Cairo's face was twisted by pain and chagrin. There were tears in his dark eyes. His skin was the complexion of polished lead except where the elbow had reddened his cheek. Maintain's grip on the Levantine's lapels turned him slowly and pushed him back until he was standing close in front of the chair he had lately occupied. A puzzled look replaced the look of pain in the lead-colored face. Then Spade smiled. His smile was gentle, even dreamy. His right shoulder raised a few inches. His bent right arm was driven up by the shoulder's lift. Fist, wrist, forearm, crooked elbow, and upper arm seemed all one rigid piece, with only the limber shoulder giving them motion. The fist struck Cairo's face, covering for a moment one side of his chin, a corner of his mouth, and most of his cheek between cheekbone and jawbone. Cairo shut his eyes and was unconscious. Spade lowered the limp body into the chair, where it lay with sprawled arms and legs, the head lolling back against the chair's back, the mouth open. Spade emptied the unconscious man's pockets one by one, working methodically, moving the lax body when necessary, making a pile of the pocket's contents on the desk. When the last pocket had been turned out, he returned to his own chair, rolled and lighted a cigarette, and began to examine his spoils. He examined them with grave, unhurried thoroughness. There was a large wallet of dark, soft leather. The wallet contained $365 in United States bills of several sizes, 3 5-pound notes, a much-vised Greek passport bearing Cairo's name and portrait, 5 folded sheets of pinkish onion skin paper covered with what seemed to be Arabic writing, a raggedly clipped newspaper account of the finding of Archer's and Thursby's bodies, a postcard photograph of a dusky woman with bold, cruel eyes and a tender, drooping mouth, a large silk handkerchief, yellow with age and somewhat cracked along its folds, a thin sheaf of Mr. Joel Cairo's engraved cards, and a ticket for an orchestra seat at the Geary Theatre that evening. Besides the wallet and its contents, there were 3 gaily colored silk handkerchiefs fragrant of chypre, a platinum Longines watch on a platinum and red gold chain, attached at the other end to a small pear-shaped pendant of some white metal, a handful of United States, British, French, and Chinese coins, a ring holding 6 keys, a silver and onyx fountain pen, a metal comb in a leatherette case, a nail file in a leatherette case, a small street guide to San Francisco, a Southern Pacific baggage check, a half-filled package of violet pasties, a Shanghai insurance broker's business card, and 4 sheets of Hotel Belvedere writing paper, on one of which was written in small, precise letters Samuel Spade's name, and the addresses of his office and his apartment. Having examined these articles carefully, he even opened the back of the watch case to see that nothing was hidden inside. Spade leaned over and took the unconscious man's wrist between finger and thumb, feeling his pulse. Then he dropped the wrist, settled back in his chair, and rolled and lighted another cigarette. His face while he smoked was, except for occasional slight and aimless movements of his lower lip, so still and reflective that it seemed stupid. But when Cairo presently moaned and fluttered his eyelids, Spade's face became bland, and he put the beginning of a friendly smile into his eyes and mouth. Joel Cairo awakened slowly. His eyes opened first, but a full minute passed before they fixed their gaze on any definite part of the ceiling. Then he shut his mouth and swallowed, exhaling heavily through his nose afterward. He drew in one foot and turned a hand over on his thigh. Then he raised his head from the chair back, looked around the office in confusion, saw Spade and sat up. He opened his mouth to speak, started, clapped a hand to his face where Spade's fist had struck, and where there was now a florid bruise. Cairo said through his teeth painfully, "I could have shot you, Mr. Spade." "You could have tried," Spade conceded. "I did not try." "I know. Then why did you strike me after I was disarmed?" "Sorry," Spade said, and grinned wolfishly, showing his jaw teeth. "But imagine my embarrassment when I found that $5,000 offer was just hooey." "You are mistaken, Mr. Spade. That was and is a genuine offer." "What the hell?" Spade's surprise was genuine. "I am prepared to pay $5,000 for the figure's return." Cairo took his hand away from his bruised face and sat up prim and businesslike again. "You have it?" "No." "If it is not here," Cairo was very politely skeptical, "why should you have risked serious injury to prevent my searching for it?" "I should sit around and let people come in and stick me up." Spade flicked a finger at Cairo's possessions on the desk. "You've got my apartment address. Been up there yet?" "Yes, Mr. Spade, I am ready to pay $5,000 for the figure's return, but surely it is natural enough that I should try first to spare the owner that expense if possible. Who is he?" Cairo shook his head and smiled. "You will have to forgive my not answering that question." "Will I?" Spade leaned forward, smiling with tight lips. "I've got you by the neck, Cairo. You've walked in and tied yourself up, plenty strong enough to suit the police with last night's killings. Well, now you'll have to play with me or else." Cairo's smile was demure and not in any way alarmed. "I made somewhat extensive inquiries about you before taking any action," he said, "and was assured that you were far too reasonable to allow other considerations to interfere with profitable business relations." Spade shrugged. "Where are they?" he asked. "I have offered you $5,000 for—" Spade thumped Cairo's wallet with the backs of his fingers and said, "There's nothing like $5,000 here. You're betting your eyes. You could come in and say you'd pay me $1 million for a purple elephant, but what in hell would that mean?" I see, Cairo said thoughtfully, screwing up his eyes. "You wish some assurance of my sincerity." He brushed his red lower lip with a fingertip. "A retainer, would that serve?" "It might." Cairo put his hand out towards his wallet, hesitated, withdrew the hand and said, "You will take, say, $100. Spade picked up the wallet and took out $100. Then he frowned, said, "Better make it 200, and did. Cairo said nothing. "Your first guess was that I had the bird," Spade said in a crisp voice when he had put the $200 into his pocket and had dropped the wallet on the desk again. "There's nothing in that. What's your second? That you know where it is, or, if not exactly that, that you know it is where you can get it?" Spade neither denied nor affirmed that. He seemed hardly to have heard it. He asked, "What sort of proof can you give me that your man is the owner?" "Very little, unfortunately. There is this, though. Nobody else can give you any authentic evidence of ownership at all, and if you know as much about the affair as I suppose, or I should not be here, you know that the means by which it was taken from him shows that his right to it was more valid than anyone else's. certainly more valid than Thursby's. What about his daughter? Spade asked. Excitement opened Cairo's eyes and mouth, turned his face red, made his voice shrill. He is not the owner, Spade said. Oh, mildly and ambiguously. Is he here in San Francisco now? Cairo asked in a less shrill but still excited voice. Spade blinked his eyes sleepily and suggested, "It might be better all around if we put our cards on the table." Cairo recovered composure with a little jerk. "I do not think it would be better." His voice was suave now. "If you know more than I shall profit by your knowledge, and so will you to the extent of $5,000. If you do not, then I have made a mistake in coming to you, and to do as you suggest would be simply to make that mistake worse." Spade nodded indifferently and waved his hand at the articles on the desk. "Oh," saying, "There's your stuff." And then, when Cairo was returning them to his pockets, "It's understood that you're to pay my expenses while I'm getting this black bird for you, and $5,000 when it's done?" "Yes, Mr. Spade. That is, $5,000 less whatever monies have been advanced to you, $5,000 in all." "Right. And it's a legitimate proposition." Spade's face was solemn except for wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. "You're not hiring me to do any murders or burglaries for you, but simply to get it back if possible in an honest and lawful way." "If possible," Cairo agreed. His face also was solemn except for the eyes. "And in any event with discretion." He rose and picked up his hat. "I am at the Hotel Belvedere when you wish to communicate with me, room 635. I confidently expect the greatest mutual benefit from our association, Mr. Spade." He hesitated. "May I have my pistol?" "Sure. I'd forgotten it." Spade took the pistol out of his coat pocket and handed it to Cairo. Cairo pointed the pistol at Spade's chest. "You will please keep your hands on the top of the desk," Cairo said earnestly. "I intend to search your offices." Spade said, "I'll be damned." Then he laughed in his throat and said, "All right, go ahead. I won't stop you." Chapter 6. The Undersized Shadow. For half an hour after Joel Cairo had gone, Spade sat alone, still and frowning at his desk. Then he said aloud in the tone of one dismissing a problem, "Well, they're paying for it," and took a bottle of Manhattan cocktail and a paper drinking cup from a desk drawer. He filled the cup 2/3 full, drank, returned the bottle to the drawer, tossed the cup into the wastebasket, put on his hat and overcoat, turned off the lights and went down to the night-lit street. An undersized youth of 20 or 21 in neat grey cap and overcoat was standing idly on the corner below Spade's building. Spade walked up Sutter Street to Kearny, where he entered a cigar store to buy 2 sacks of Bull Durham. When he came out, the youth was one of 4 people waiting for a streetcar on the opposite corner. Spade ate dinner at Herbert's Grill in Powell Street. When he left the grill, at 7:45, the youth was looking into a nearby haberdasher's window. Spade went to the Hotel Belvedere, asking at the desk for Mr. Cairo. He was told that Cairo was not in. The youth sat in a chair in a far corner of the lobby. Spade went to the Geary Theatre, failed to see Cairo in the lobby, and posted himself on the curb in front, facing the theatre. The youth loitered with other loiterers before Marquard's restaurant below. At 8:10, Joel Cairo appeared, walking up Geary Street with his little mincing bobbing steps. Apparently he did not see Spade until the private detective touched his shoulder. He seemed moderately surprised for a moment and then said, "Oh yes, of course you saw the ticket. Aha, I've got something I want to show you." Spade drew Cairo back towards the curb a little away from the other waiting theatre-goers. "The kid in the cap down by Marquard's," Cairo murmured. "I'll see," and looked at his watch. He looked up Geary Street. He looked at a theatre sign in front of him on which George Arliss was shown costumed as Shylock, and then his dark eyes crawled sidewise in their sockets until they were looking at the kid in the cap, at his cool pale face with curling lashes hiding lowered eyes. "Who is he?" Spade asked. Cairo smiled up at Spade. "I do not know him. He's been tailing me around town." Cairo wet his lower lip with his tongue and asked, "Do you think it was wise, then, to let him see us together?" "How do I know?" Spade replied. "Anyway, it's done. Cairo removed his hat and smoothed his hair with a gloved hand. He replaced his hat carefully on his head and said with every appearance of candor, "I give you my word I do not know him, Mr. Spade. I give you my word I have nothing to do with him. I have asked nobody's assistance except yours, on my word of honor." "Then he's one of the others?" "That may be. I just wanted to know because if he gets to be a nuisance I may have to hurt him." "Do as you think best. He is not a friend of mine." "That's good. There goes the curtain. Good night," Spade said, and crossed the street to board a westbound streetcar. The youth in the cap boarded the same car. Spade left the car at Hyde Street and went up to his apartment. His rooms were not greatly upset, but showed unmistakable signs of having been searched. When Spade had washed and had put on a fresh shirt and collar, he went out again, walked up to Sutter Street and boarded a westbound car. The youth boarded it also. Within half a dozen blocks of the Coronet, Spade left the car and went into the vestibule of a tall brown apartment building. He pressed 3 bell buttons together. The street door lock buzzed. He entered, passed the elevator and stairs, went down a long yellow-walled corridor to the rear of the building, found a hack door fastened by a Yale lock, and let himself out into a narrow court. The court led to a dark back street, up which Spade walked for 2 blocks. Then he crossed over to California Street and went to the Coronet. It was not quite 9:30 o'clock. The eagerness with which Bridget O'Shaughnessy welcomed Spade suggested that she had been not entirely certain of his coming. She had put on a satin gown of the blue shade called artoise that season, with chalcedony shoulder straps, and her stockings and slippers were artoise. The red and cream sitting-room had been brought to order, and livened with flowers in squat pottery vases of black and silver. 3 small rough-barked logs burned in the fireplace. Spade watched them burn while she put away his hat and coat. "Do you bring me good news?" she asked when she came into the room again. Anxiety looked through her smile and she held her breath. "We won't have to make anything public that hasn't already been made public. The police won't have to know about me? No." She sighed happily and sat on the walnut settee. Her face relaxed and her body relaxed. She smiled up at him with admiring eyes. "However did you manage it?" she asked, more in wonder than in curiosity. "Most things in San Francisco can be bought, or taken, and you won't get into trouble. Do sit down." She made room for him on the settee. "I don't mind a reasonable amount of trouble," he said with not too much complacency. He stood beside the fireplace and looked at her with eyes that studied, weighed, judged her without pretense that they were not studying, weighing, judging her. She flushed slightly under the frankness of his scrutiny, but she seemed more sure of herself than before, though a becoming shyness had not left her eyes. He stood there until it seemed plain that he meant to ignore her invitation to sit beside her, and then crossed to the settee. "You aren't," he asked as he sat down, "exactly the sort of person you pretend to be, are you?" "I'm not sure I know what you mean," she said in her hushed voice, looking at him with puzzled eyes. "Schoolgirl manner," he explained, stammering and blushing and all that. She blushed and replied hurriedly, not looking at him, "I told you this afternoon that I've been bad worse than you could know." "That's what I mean," he said. "You told me that this afternoon in the same words, same tone. It's a speech you've practiced." After a moment in which she seemed confused almost to the point of tears, she laughed and said, "Very well then, Mr. Spade. I'm not at all the sort of person I pretend to be. I'm 80 years old, incredibly wicked, and an iron moulder by trade. But if it's a pose, it's one I've grown into, so you won't expect me to drop it entirely, will you?" "Oh, it's all right," he assured her. "Only it wouldn't be all right if you were actually that innocent. We'd never get anywhere." "I won't be innocent," she promised with a hand on her heart. "I saw Joel Cairo tonight," he said in the manner of one making polite conversation. Gaiety went out of her face. Her eyes, focused on his profile, became frightened, then cautious. He had stretched his legs out and was looking at his crossed feet. His face did not indicate that he was thinking about anything. There was a long pause before she asked uneasily, You know him?" "I saw him tonight." Spade did not look up, and he maintained his light conversational tone. He was going to see George Arliss. You mean you talked to him? Only for a minute or two till the curtain bell rang. She got up from the settee and went to the fireplace to poke the fire. She changed slightly the position of an ornament on the mantelpiece, crossed the room to get a box of cigarettes from a table in a corner, straightened a curtain, and returned to her seat. Her face now was smooth and unworried. Spade grinned sidewise at her and said, "You're good. You're very good." Her face did not change. She asked quietly, "What did he say? About what?" She hesitated. "About me." "Nothing." Spade turned to hold his lighter under the end of her cigarette. His eyes were shiny in a wooden Satan's face. "Well, what did he say?" she asked with half-playful petulance. "He offered me $5,000 for the black bird." She started, her teeth tore the end of her cigarette, and her eyes, after a swift alarmed glance at Spade, turned away from him. "You're not going to go around poking at the fire and straightening up the room again, are you?" he asked lazily. She laughed a clear, merry laugh, dropped the mangled cigarette into a tray, and looked at him with clear, merry eyes. "I won't," she promised. "And what did you say? $5,000 is a lot of money." She smiled, but when instead of smiling he looked gravely at her, her smile became faint, confused, and presently vanished. In its place came a hurt, bewildered look. "Surely you're not really considering it," she said. "Why not? $5,000 is a lot of money. But Mr. Spade, you promised to help me." Her hands were on his arm. "I trusted you. You can't—" She broke off, took her hands from his sleeve and worked them together. Spade smiled gently into her troubled eyes. Let's try to figure out how much you've trusted me," he said. "I promised to help you, sure, but you didn't say anything about any black birds." "But you must have known, or you wouldn't have mentioned it to me." "You do know now. You won't— You can't treat me like that." Her eyes were cobalt-blue prayers. $5,000 is," he said for the third time, "a lot of money." She lifted her shoulders and hands and let them fall in a gesture that accepted defeat. "It is," she agreed in a small, dull voice. "It is far more than I could ever offer you, if I must bid for your loyalty." Spade laughed. His laughter was brief and somewhat bitter. "That is good," he said, "coming from you. What have you given me besides money? Have you given me any of your confidence? Any of the truth? Any help in helping you? Haven't you tried to buy my loyalty with money and nothing else? Well, if I'm peddling it, why shouldn't I let it go to the highest bidder? I've given you all the money I have." Tears glinted in her white-ringed eyes. Her voice was hoarse, vibrant. "I've thrown myself on your mercy, told you that without your help I'm utterly lost. What else is there?" She suddenly moved close to him on the settee and cried angrily, "Can I buy you with my body?" Their faces were few inches apart. Spade took her face between his hands, and he kissed her mouth roughly and contemptuously. Then he sat back and said, "I'll think it over." His face was hard and furious. She sat still, holding her numb face where his hands had left it. He stood up and said, "Christ, there's no sense to this." He took 2 steps towards the fireplace and stopped, glowering at the burning logs, grinding his teeth together. She did not move. He turned to face her. The 2 vertical lines above his nose were deep clefts between red whales. "I don't give a damn about your honesty," he told her, trying to make himself speak calmly. "I don't care what kind of tricks you're up to, what your secrets are, but I've got to have something to show that you know what you're doing. I do know. Please believe that I do, and that it's all for the best, and—" "Show me," he ordered. "I'm willing to help you. I've done what I could so far. If necessary, I'll go ahead blindfolded. But I can't do it without more confidence in you than I've got now. You've got to convince me that you know what it's all about, that you're not simply fiddling around by guess and by God, hoping it'll come out all right somehow in the end. Can't you trust me just a little longer? How much is a little? And what are you waiting for?" She bit her lip and looked down. "I must talk to Joel Cairo," she said almost inaudibly. "You can see him tonight," Spade said, looking at his watch. "His show will be out soon. We can get him on the phone at his hotel." She raised her eyes, alarmed. "But he can't come here. I can't let him know where I am. I'm afraid. My place, Spade suggested. She hesitated, working her lips together, then asked, Do you think he'd go there? Spade nodded. All right, she exclaimed, jumping up, her eyes large and bright. Shall we go now? She went into the next room. Spade went to the table in the corner and silently pulled the drawer out. The drawer held 2 packs of playing cards, a pad of scorecards for bridge, a brass screw, a piece of red string, and a gold pencil. He had shut the drawer and was lighting a cigarette when she returned, wearing a small dark hat and a grey kidskin coat, carrying his hat and coat. Their taxicab drew up behind a dark sedan that stood directly in front of Spade's street door. Eva Archer was alone in the sedan, sitting at the wheel. Spade lifted his hat to her and went indoors with Bridget O'Shaughnessy. In the lobby he halted beside one of the benches and asked, Do you mind waiting here a moment? I won't be long. That's perfectly all right, Bridget O'Shaughnessy said, sitting down. You needn't hurry. Spade went out to the sedan. When he had opened the sedan's door, Ivor spoke quickly. I've got to talk to you, Sam. Can't I come in? Her face was pale and nervous. Not now. Ivor clicked her teeth together and asked sharply, Who is she? I've only a minute, Ivor, Spade said patiently. What is it? Who is she? She repeated, nodding at the street door. He looked away from her. Down the street. Who? In front of a garage on the next corner, an undersized youth of 20 or 21, in neat grey cap and overcoat, loafed with his back against a wall. Spade frowned and returned his gaze to Ivor's insistent face. What is the matter? He asked. Has anything happened? You oughtn't to be here at this time of night. I'm beginning to believe that, she complained. You told me I oughtn't to come to the office, and now I oughtn't to come here. Do you mean I oughtn't to chase after you? If that's what you mean, why don't you say it right out? Now, Ivor, you've got no right to take that attitude. I know I haven't. I haven't any rights at all, it seems, where you're concerned. I thought I did. I thought your pretending to love me gave me... Spade said wearily, This is no time to be arguing about that precious... What was it you wanted to see me about? I can't talk to you here, Sam. Can't I come in? Not now. Why can't I? Spade said nothing. She made a thin line of her mouth, squirmed around straight behind the wheel, and started the sedan's engine, staring angrily ahead. When the sedan began to move, Spade said, Good night, Ivor, shut the door, and stood at the curb with his hat in his hand until it had been driven away. Then he went indoors again. Bridget O'Shaughnessy rose smiling cheerfully from the bench, and they went up to his apartment. Chapter 7. G in the Air. In his bedroom that was a living room now the wall bed was up, Spade took Bridget O'Shaughnessy's hat and coat, made her comfortable in a padded rocking chair, and telephoned the Hotel Belvedere. Cairo had not returned from the theatre. Spade left his telephone number with the request that Cairo call him as soon as he came in. Spade sat down in the armchair beside the table and without any preliminary, without an introductory remark of any sort, began to tell the girl about a thing that had happened some years before in the Northwest. He talked in a steady, matter-of-fact voice that was devoid of emphasis or pauses, though now and then he repeated a sentence slightly rearranged, as if it were important that each detail be related exactly as it had happened. At the beginning, Bridget O'Shaughnessy listened with only partial attentiveness, obviously more surprised by his telling the story than interested in it, her curiosity more engaged with his purpose in telling the story than with the story he told. But presently, as the story went on, it caught her more and more fully, and she became still and receptive. A man named Flitcraft had left his real estate office in Tacoma to go to luncheon one day and had never returned. He did not keep an engagement to play golf after 4 that afternoon, though he had taken the initiative in making the engagement less than half an hour before he went out to luncheon. His wife and children never saw him again. His wife and he were supposed to be on the best of terms. He had 2 children, boys, one 5 and the other 3. He owned his house in a Tacoma suburb, a new Packard, and the rest of the appurtenances of successful American living. Flitcraft had inherited $70,000 from his father and, with his success in real estate, was worth something in the neighborhood of $200,000 at the time he vanished. His affairs were in order, though there were enough loose ends to indicate that he had not been setting them in order preparatory to vanishing. A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." When he had reached this point in his story, the telephone bell rang. "Hello," Spade said into the instrument. "Mr. Cairo?" A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." When he had reached this point in his story, the telephone bell rang. "Hello," Spade said into the instrument. "Mr. Cairo?" A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." When he had reached this point in his story, the telephone bell rang. "Hello," Spade said into the instrument. "Mr. Cairo? This is Spade. Can you come up to my place Post Street now?" A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." When he had reached this point in his story, the telephone bell rang. "Hello," Spade said into the instrument. "Mr. Cairo? This is Spade. Can you come up to my place Post Street now?" A deal that would have brought him an attractive profit, for instance, was to have been concluded the day after the one on which he disappeared. There was nothing to suggest that he had more than $50 or $60 in his immediate possession at the time of his going. His habits for months past could be accounted for too thoroughly to justify any suspicion of secret vices, or even of another woman in his life, though either was barely possible. "He went like that," Spade said, "like a fist when you open your hand." When he had reached this point in his story, the telephone bell rang. "Hello," Spade said into the instrument. "Mr. Cairo? This is Spade. Can you come up to my place Post Street now?" "Yes, I think it is." He looked at the girl, pursed his lips, and then said rapidly, "Miss O'Shaughnessy is here and wants to see you." Bridget O'Shaughnessy frowned and stirred in her chair, but did not say anything. Spade put the telephone down and told her, "He'll be up in a few minutes." Well, that was in 1922. In 1927 I was with one of the big detective agencies in Seattle. Mrs. Flitcroft came in and told us somebody had seen a man in Spokane who looked a lot like her husband. I went over there. It was Flitcroft, all right. He had been living in Spokane for a couple of years as Charles, that was his first name, Pierce. He had an automobile business that was netting him $20,000 or $25,000 a year. A wife, a baby son, owned his home in a Spokane suburb, and usually got away to play golf after 4 in the afternoon during the season. Spade had not been told very definitely what to do when he found Flitcroft. They talked in Spade's room at the Davenport. Flitcroft had no feeling of guilt. He had left his first family well provided for, and what he had done seemed to him perfectly reasonable. The only thing that bothered him was a doubt that he could make that reasonableness clear to Spade. He had never told anybody his story before, and thus had not had to attempt to make its reasonableness explicit. He tried now. "I got it all right," Spade told Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "But Mrs. Flitcraft never did. She thought it was silly. Maybe it was. Anyway, it came out all right. She didn't want any scandal, and after the trick he had played on her, the way she looked at it, she in Lee Air 77 want him. So they were divorced on the quiet and everything was swell all around. Here's what had happened to him. Going to lunch, he passed an office building that was being put up, just the skeleton. A beam or something fell 8 or 10 stories down and smacked the sidewalk alongside him. It brushed pretty close to him but didn't touch him, though a piece of the sidewalk was chipped off and flew up and hit his cheek. It only took a piece of skin off, but he still had the scar when I saw him. He rubbed it with his finger well, affectionately, when he told me about it. He was scared stiff, of course, he said, but he was more shocked than really frightened. He felt like somebody had taken the lid off life and let him look at the works. Flitcraft had been a good citizen and a good husband and father, not by any outer compulsion, but simply because he was a man who was most comfortable in step with his surroundings. He had been raised that way. The people he knew were like that. The life he knew was a clean, orderly, sane, responsible affair. Now a falling beam had shown him that life was fundamentally none of these things. He, the good citizen husband-father, could be wiped out between office and restaurant by the accident of a falling beam. He knew then that men died at haphazard like that, and lived only while blind chance spared them. It was not primarily the injustice of it that disturbed him. He accepted that after the first shock. What disturbed him was the discovery that in sensibly ordering his affairs he had got out of step, and not into step with life. He said he knew before he had gone 20 feet from the fallen beam that he would never know peace again until he had adjusted himself to this new glimpse of life. By the time he had eaten his luncheon, he had found his means of adjustment. Life could be ended for him at random by a falling beam. He would change his life at random by simply going away. He loved his family, he said, as much as he supposed was usual, but he knew he was leaving them adequately provided for, and his love for them was not of the sort that would make absence painful. He went to Seattle that afternoon, Spade said, and from there by boat to San Francisco. For a couple of years he wandered around and then drifted back to the Northwest, and settled in Spokane and got married. His second wife didn't look like the first, but they were more alike than they were different. You know, the kind of women that play fair games of golf and bridge and like new salad recipes. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. It seemed reasonable enough to him. I don't think he even knew he had settled back naturally into the same groove he had jumped out of in Tacoma. But that's the part of it I always liked. He adjusted himself to beams falling, and then no more of them fell, and he adjusted himself to them not falling. "How perfectly fascinating," Bridget O'Shaughnessy said. She left her chair and stood in front of him, close. Her eyes were wide and deep. "I don't have to tell you how utterly at a disadvantage you'll have me, with him here, if you choose." Spade smiled slightly without separating his lips. "No, you don't have to tell me," he agreed. "And you know I'd never have placed myself in this position if I hadn't trusted you completely." Her thumb and forefinger twisted a black button on his blue coat. Spade said, "That again," with mock resignation. "But you know it's so," she insisted. "No, I don't know it." He patted the hand that was twisting the button. "My asking for reasons why I should trust you brought us here. Don't let's confuse things. You don't have to trust me anyhow, as long as you can persuade me to trust you." She studied his face. Her nostrils quivered. Spade laughed. He patted her hand again and said, "Don't worry about that now. He'll be here in a moment. Get your business with him over, and then we'll see how we'll stand. And you'll let me go about it with him in my own way?" "Sure." She turned her hand under his so that her fingers pressed his. She said softly, "You're a godsend." Spade said, "Don't overdo it." She looked reproachfully at him, though smiling, and returned to the padded rocker. Joel Cairo was excited. His dark eyes seemed all irises, and his high-pitched, thin-voiced words were tumbling out before Spade had the door half open. "That boy is out there watching the house, Mr. Spade, that boy you showed me, or to whom you showed me in front of the theatre. What am I to understand from that, Mr. Spade? I came here in good faith, with no thought of tricks or traps." "You were asked in good faith." Spade frowned thoughtfully. But I ought to have guessed he might show up. He saw you come in? Naturally. I could have gone on, but that seemed useless since you had already let him see us together. Bridget O'Shaughnessy came into the passageway behind Spade and asked anxiously, "What boy? What is it?" Cairo removed his black hat from his head, bowed stiffly, and said in a prim voice, "If you do not know, ask Mr. Spade. I know nothing about it except through him." "A kid who's been trying to tail me around town all evening," Spade said carelessly over his shoulder, not turning to face the girl. "Come on in, Cairo. There's no use standing here talking for all the neighbors." Bridget O'Shaughnessy grasped Spade's arm above the elbow and demanded, "Did he follow you to my apartment?" "No. I shook him before that. Then I suppose he came back here to try to pick me up again." Cairo, holding his black hat to his belly with both hands, had come into the passageway. Spade shut the corridor door behind him, and they went into the living room. There Cairo bowed stiffly over his hat once more and said, "I am delighted to see you again, Miss O'Shaughnessy." "I was sure you would be, Joe," she replied, giving him her hand. He made a formal bow over her hand and released it quickly. She sat in the padded rocker she had occupied before. Cairo sat in the armchair by the table. Spade, when he had hung Cairo's hat and coat in the closet, sat on an end of the sofa in front of the windows and began to roll a cigarette. Bridget O'Shaughnessy said to Cairo, "Sam told me about your offer for the Falcon. How soon can you have the money ready?" Cairo's eyebrows twitched. He smiled. "It is ready." He continued to smile at the girl for a little while after he had spoken, and then looked at Spade. Spade was lighting his cigarette. His face was tranquil. "In cash?" the girl asked. "Oh, yes," Cairo replied. She frowned, put her tongue between her lips, withdrew it, and asked, "You are ready to give us $5,000 now, if we give you the Falcon?" Cairo held up a wriggling hand. "Excuse me," he said. "I expressed myself badly. I did not mean to say that I have the money in my pockets, but that I am prepared to get it on a very few minutes' notice at any time during banking hours." "Oh!" She looked at Spade. Spade blew cigarette smoke down the front of his vest and said, "That's probably right. He had only a few hundred in his pockets when I frisked him this afternoon." When her eyes opened round and wide, he grinned. The Levantine bent forward in his chair. He failed to keep eagerness from showing in his eyes and voice. "I can be quite prepared to give you the money at, say, 10:30 in the morning, eh?" Bridget O'Shaughnessy smiled at him and said, "But I haven't got the Falcon." Cairo's face was darkened by a flush of annoyance. He put an ugly hand on either arm of his chair, holding his small-boned body erect and stiff between them. His dark eyes were angry. He did not say anything. The girl made a mock placatory face at him. "I'll have it in a week at the most, though," she said. "Where is it?" Cairo used politeness of mien to express skepticism. "Where Floyd hid it." "Floyd? Thursby?" She nodded. "And you know where that is?" he asked. "I think I do." "Then why must we wait a week?" "Perhaps not a whole week. Whom are you buying it for, Joe?" Cairo raised his eyebrows. "I told Mr. Spade, for its owner." Surprise illuminated the girl's face. "So you went back to him?" "Naturally I did." She laughed softly in her throat and said, "I should have liked to have seen that." Cairo shrugged. "That was the logical development." He rubbed the back of one hand with the palm of the other. His upper lids came down to shade his eyes. "Why, if I in turn may ask a question, are you willing to sell to me?" "I'm afraid," she said simply. "After what happened to Floyd. That's why I haven't it now. I'm afraid to touch it except to turn it over to somebody else right away." Spade, propped on an elbow on the sofa, looked at and listened to them impartially. In the comfortable slackness of his body, in the easy stillness of his features, there was no indication of either curiosity or impatience. "Exactly what," Cairo asked in a low voice, "happened to Floyd?" The tip of Bridget O'Shaughnessy's right forefinger traced a swift G in the air. Cairo said, "I see." But there was something doubting in his smile. "Is he here?" "I don't know." she spoke impatiently. "What difference does it make?" The doubt in Cairo's smile deepened. "It might make a world of difference," he said, and rearranged his hands in his lap so that, intentionally or not, a blunt forefinger pointed at Spade. The girl glanced at the pointing finger and made an impatient motion with her head. "Or me," she said. "Or you." "Exactly. And shall we add more certainly the boy outside?" "Yes," she agreed and laughed. "Yes, unless he's the one you had in Constantinople." Sudden blood mottled Cairo's face. In a shrill, enraged voice he cried, "The one you couldn't make?" Bridget O'Shaughnessy jumped up from her chair. Her lower lip was between her teeth. Her eyes were dark and wide in a tense white face. She took 2 quick steps towards Cairo. He started to rise. Her right hand went out and cracked sharply against his cheek, leaving the imprint of fingers there. Cairo grunted and slapped her cheek, staggering her sidewise, bringing from her mouth a brief muffled scream. Spade, wooden of face, was up from the sofa and close to them by then. He caught Cairo by the throat and shook him. Cairo gurgled and put a hand inside his coat. Spade grasped the Levantine's wrist, wrenched it away from the coat, forced it straight out to the side, and twisted it until the clumsy, flaccid fingers opened to let the black pistol fall down on the rug. Bridget O'Shaughnessy quickly picked up the pistol. Cairo, speaking with difficulty because of the fingers on his throat, said, "This is the second time you've put your hands on me." His eyes, though the throttling pressure on his throat made them bulge, were cold and menacing. "Yes," Spade growled, "and when you're slapped you'll take it and like it." He released Cairo's wrist, and with a thick open hand struck the side of his face 3 times savagely. Cairo tried to spit in Spade's face, but the dryness of the Levantine's mouth made it only an angry gesture. Spade slapped the mouth, cutting the lower lip. The doorbell rang. Cairo's eyes jerked into focus on the passageway that led to the corridor door. His eyes had become unangry and wary. The girl had gasped and turned to face the passageway. Her face was frightened. Spade stared gloomily for a moment at the blood trickling from Cairo's lip, and then stepped back, taking his hand from the Levantine's throat. "Who is it?" the girl whispered, coming close to Spade, and Cairo's eyes jerked back to ask the same question. Spade gave his answer irritably. "I don't know." The bell rang again, more insistently. "Well, keep quiet," Spade said, and went out of the room, shutting the door behind him. Spade turned on the light in the passageway and opened the door to the corridor. Lieutenant Dundee and Tom Polhouse were there. "Hello, Sam," Tom said. "We thought maybe you wouldn't have gone to bed yet." Dundee nodded, but said nothing. Spade said good-naturedly, "Hello. You guys pick swell hours to do your visiting in. What is it this time?" Dundee spoke then, quietly. "We want to talk to you, Spade." "Well?" Spade stood in the doorway, blocking it. "Go ahead and talk." Tom Polhouse advanced, saying, "We don't have to do it standing here, do we?" Spade stood in the doorway and said, "You can't come in." His tone was very slightly apologetic. Tom's thick-featured face, even in height with Spade's, took on an expression of friendly scorn, though there was a bright gleam in his small, shrewd eyes. "What the hell, Sam?" he protested and put a big hand playfully on Spade's chest. Spade leaned against the pushing hand, grinned wolfishly, and asked, "Going to strong-arm me, Tom?" Tom grumbled, "Oh, for God's sake," and took his hand away. Dundee clicked his teeth together and said through them, "Let us in." Spade's lip twitched over his eye-tooth. He said, "You're not coming in. What do you want to do about it? Try to get in? Or do your talking here? Or go to hell?" Tom groaned. Dundee, still speaking through his teeth, said, "It'd pay you to play along with us a little, Spade. You've got away with this and you've got away with that, but you can't keep it up forever." "Stop me when you can," Spade replied arrogantly. "That's what I'll do." Dundee put his hands behind him and thrust his hard face up towards the private detectives. "There's talk going around that you and Archer's wife were cheating on him." Spade laughed. "That sounds like something you thought up yourself. Then there's not anything to it?" "Not anything." "The talk is," Dundee said, "that she tried to get a divorce out of him so she could put in with you, but he wouldn't give it to her. Anything to that?" "No. There's even talk," Dundee went on stolidly, "that's why he was put on the spot." Spade seemed mildly amused. "Don't be a hog," he said. "You oughtn't try to pin more than one murder at a time on me. Your first idea that I knocked Thursby off because he'd killed Miles falls apart if you blame me for killing Miles too." "You haven't heard me say you killed anybody," Dundee replied. "You're the one that keeps bringing that up. But suppose I did, you could have blipped them both. There's a way of figuring it." "Aha. I could have butchered Miles to get his wife and then Thursby so I could hang Miles's killing on him. That's a hell of a swell system, or will be when I can give somebody else the bump and hang Thursby's on them." How long am I supposed to keep that up? Are you going to put your hand on my shoulder for all the killings in San Francisco from now on?" Tom said, "Oh, cut the comedy, Sam. You know damned well we don't like this any more than you do, but we got our work to do." "I hope you've got something to do besides pop in here early every morning with a lot of damned fool questions. And get damned lying answers," Dundee added deliberately. "Take it easy," Spade cautioned him. Dundee looked him up and down and then looked him straight in the eyes. "If you say there was nothing between you and Archer's wife," he said, "you're a liar, and I'm telling you so." A startled look came into Tom's small eyes. Spade moistened his lips with the tip of his tongue and asked, "Is that the hot tip that brought you here at this ungodly time of night?" "That's one of them." "And the others?" Dundee pulled down the corners of his mouth. "Let us in." He nodded significantly at the doorway in which Spade stood. Spade frowned and shook his head. Dundee's mouth corners lifted in a smile of grim satisfaction. "There must have been something to it," he told Tom. Tom shifted his feet and, not looking at either man, mumbled, "God knows." "What's this?" Spade asked. "Charades?" "All right, Spade, we're going." Dundee buttoned his overcoat. "We'll be in to see you now and then. Maybe you're right in bucking us. Think it over." "Uh-huh," Spade said, grinning. "Glad to see you any time, Lieutenant, and whenever I'm not busy I'll let you in." A voice in Spade's living room screamed, "Help! Help! Police! Help!" The voice, high and thin and shrill, was Joel Cairo's. Lieutenant Dundee stopped turning away from the door, confronted Spade again and said decisively, "I guess we're going in." The sounds of a brief struggle, of a blow, of a subdued cry came to them. Spade's face twisted into a smile that held little joy. He said, "I guess you are," and stood out of the way. When the police detectives had entered, he shut the corridor door and followed them back to the living room.